Before dawn on June 6, 1944, Oberleutnant Walter Ohmsen stood upon the observation platform of the Crisbeck coastal battery overlooking the grey expanse of the English Channel. The horizon, normally silent and vast, now shimmered with strange illumination resembling a distant storm, yet carrying mechanical rhythm beneath the wind. His field glasses revealed what appeared at first like fog rolling toward Normandy's beaches, but the mist concealed shadows, thousands of them, each resolving gradually into ships advancing in endless formation. At precisely 4:47 hours, Ohmsen adjusted his rangefinder and froze. The sea itself seemed alive, covered with steel as far as vision reached. Destroyers, cruisers, transports, and landing craft stretched across the water in unbroken ranks. Within minutes, reports from other batteries confirmed identical sightings from Cherbourg to Le Havre. The Channel had become an armada unlike any recorded in human history, nearly 7,000 vessels, moving as one living organism forged by industry. Even the most disciplined officers stared wordlessly through their periscopes, realizing that no defense conceived by men could repel such magnitude. Inside the command bunker, teleprinters rattled continuously, transmitting fragmented orders drowned beneath the thunder of approaching naval guns. Maps covering the concrete walls now seemed meaningless, their careful defensive zones swallowed by reality's tide. Major Wilhelm Meyer, the battery's commander, attempted coordination with neighboring positions, but communications collapsed under relentless bombardment. Shells screamed overhead, shaking instruments loose from brackets, covering uniforms with powdered concrete. Yet amid chaos, Ohmsen's focus never wavered. He watched through shattered lenses, documenting each wave as if recording the end of an era. When the first Allied barrage struck the shoreline, the ground convulsed violently, throwing debris across the observation deck. Through smoke and dust, flashes revealed silhouettes of landing craft, lowering ramps under covering fire. Infantry poured forth into blinding light, advancing across surf churned by explosions. For the German defenders, the spectacle was not merely terrifying, it was humbling. They saw not men, but machinery of civilization, coordinated beyond imagination, unstoppable in rhythm and scale. As morning advanced, Ohmsen realized something deeper than defeat had arrived. Every shell he fired, every order shouted into failing radios, felt irrelevant against this industrial tide. Above the thunder, his mind repeated a single truth. Germany had prepared for war of courage, but their enemies had mastered the science of abundance. By mid-morning on June 6, 1944, the Channel thundered beneath waves of artillery that seemed to breathe and roar simultaneously. The Allied armada had unfolded in perfect orchestration, its scale exceeding anything German intelligence had previously believed possible. From the cliffs above Saint-Marcouf, Oberleutnant Walter Ohmsen watched ships shifting in coordinated precision, destroyers weaving between transports while battleships anchored farther offshore unleashed broadsides that tore the coastline apart. The air trembled continuously, as if the earth itself protested against the mechanical fury unleashed upon Normandy's shore. Each explosion illuminated silhouettes of amphibious vessels advancing through smoke, their decks brimming with tanks and vehicles waiting for deployment. Spotters identified British, American, and Canadian markings intermingled within a single operational pattern, a vision of Allied unity forged through industrial synchronization. Ohmsen's range officers estimated that every 10 seconds, another salvo from offshore artillery struck within their defensive perimeter, grinding fortifications into dust. The defenders' counterfire proved futile, their shells vanishing against armor plating thicker than concrete itself. Above the din, Luftwaffe signals reported total absence of friendly aircraft. The skies had become Allied dominion. Messages from 7th Army headquarters confirmed that over 14,000 Allied aircraft sorties had already occurred by late morning, saturating communication lines and rail corridors far beyond the beaches. Fighter bombers dove across the countryside, annihilating supply convoys and scattering retreating infantry. German officers realized that air superiority was not merely tactical advantage but a fundamental expression of production supremacy. The Allies possessed more aircraft than Germany could hope to manufacture within an entire year, a fact no propaganda could disguise. The sky was no longer a battlefield. It was a factory's extension operating through wings and engines. Inside the Crisbeck bunker, Ohmsen's crew worked feverishly to maintain firing order, though ammunition dwindled and targeting optics shattered from concussion. Their coastal guns roared defiantly, yet their thunder sounded small against the immensity surrounding them. Every report reaching headquarters grew shorter, bleaker, resigned. The Channel, once Germany's protective barrier, had transformed into a corridor of inevitability. When an incoming shell struck the observation tower directly, collapsing half the structure, Ohmsen crawled from debris to witness smoke columns stretching beyond horizon. Amid fire and ruin, he whispered to no one, "This is not an invasion. It is industry coming ashore." In that realization, every myth of superiority Germany had crafted dissolved into dust carried by the morning wind. By noon on June 6, 1944, the once feared Atlantic Wall had ceased to exist as a defensive concept, replaced instead by smoke, chaos, and disbelief. German engineers who had constructed those fortifications under years of propaganda now watched them crumble beneath the relentless coordination of Allied firepower. Concrete bunkers designed to withstand direct bombardment split open like clay pots under naval salvos, heavier than anything previously recorded. Oberleutnant Walter Ohmsen, positioned among the remnants of Crisbeck Battery, witnessed centuries of military tradition disintegrating before technological precision and industrial scale. From his shattered command post, Ohmsen relayed fragmented reports to regional headquarters describing enemy infantry advancing under perfect artillery cover. Yet transmissions often returned garbled or silent, evidence that command hierarchy itself was collapsing alongside fortifications. Artillerymen abandoned positions rendered useless by destroyed targeting systems, while minefields exploded prematurely under relentless bombardment. The defenders' strategy, anchored in static resistance, had become meaningless against adversaries capable of replenishing munitions faster than destruction could consume them. The Atlantic Wall had promised invincibility, but the promise proved built upon misunderstanding of modern war's true foundation: production, logistics, and unyielding replacement. By mid-afternoon, Allied engineers had begun clearing obstacles with terrifying efficiency, detonating explosives to carve corridors for landing vehicles. Ohmsen's binoculars revealed amphibious tanks crawling across the beaches under clouds of smoke, advancing steadily despite heavy resistance. German machine gun fire slowed them momentarily, but waves behind simply absorbed the losses and continued forward, their discipline reflecting machinery rather than emotion. The defenders fought bravely, yet bravery no longer mattered. Every destroyed landing craft was instantly replaced by 3 more following identical vectors with mathematical precision. Inside remaining bunkers, surviving officers debated retreat, yet their radios crackled with conflicting directives from higher command. Field Marshal Rommel, absent due to consultation in Germany, had warned that an invasion's success would depend upon hours, not days. Now, as reinforcements remained immobilized by Allied aircraft striking every bridge and road junction, those hours had evaporated irretrievably. Even veteran soldiers began whispering that divine protection had shifted toward the invaders. When the afternoon tide receded, the beaches lay covered with wreckage, steel, bodies, and shattered equipment. Yet the flow of Allied reinforcements continued undeterred. Standing amid debris, Ohmsen realized Germany's line of defense was not breached by valor but dissolved by arithmetic. The Atlantic Wall, Germany's boast of permanence, had fallen beneath numbers no courage could withstand. From the observation towers of Cherbourg to the command rooms buried beneath Saint-Lô, German officers struggled to interpret a battle already lost. Binoculars trembled in their hands as the Channel horizon vanished behind a metallic horizon of ships stretching endlessly into the grey sea. Communications officers spoke in measured tones, yet their reports carried undertones of disbelief, repeating figures that defied military comprehension or historical precedent. The invasion fleet, extending 40 miles wide, represented not an army's maneuver but an industrial manifestation of total mobilization. Oberleutnant Walter Ohmsen adjusted his rangefinder repeatedly, each recalibration confirming that the approaching formations were beyond numerical definition. Through his lenses, destroyers escorted transports in precise coordination, their smoke trails forming geometric patterns across the sea's surface. No amount of artillery mathematics could calculate sufficient resistance against such quantity. Officers accustomed to counting battalions now confronted production charts rendered into motion, every vessel representing a factory's contribution to strategic annihilation. The Atlantic Wall had been built to stop soldiers, not systems. In the underground headquarters, reports converged into chaos. Telegraph lines crackled with overlapping transmissions from Normandy sectors, each demanding reinforcements that no longer existed. Generals compared damage reports, yet the true damage lay in their realization that command authority meant nothing when communication infrastructure had collapsed. Even elite divisions stationed inland for counterattack could no longer move under continuous bombardment by Allied fighter bombers. Each convoy attempting reinforcement was destroyed before crossing the Seine, reduced to burning fragments visible from reconnaissance towers. As dusk approached, the officers gathered around a situation map illuminated by flickering lamps. Red pins marking Allied positions multiplied uncontrollably, spreading inland with terrifying velocity. A colonel whispered that the enemy had landed nearly 156,000 men within 12 hours, supported by 14,000 sorties, and that total firepower exceeded Germany's available artillery by a factor of 10. Another officer noted that radar screens displayed constant motion, suggesting reinforcements continuing through the night. None spoke of victory now, only duration. How long could defense persist before arithmetic consumed courage completely? When midnight arrived, Ohmsen stepped outside the bunker, his uniform coated with concrete dust, his ears still echoing from artillery thunder. The sea glowed faintly with reflected flames, while silhouettes of Allied ships remained endless along the horizon. For the first time since the campaign began, he understood that the war's true front line was not Normandy's sand, but the factories across the Atlantic that never slept. By dawn on June 7, 1944, the truth that had lingered beneath Germany's confidence finally revealed its inescapable shape. The invasion's scale was no longer a battlefield confrontation, but an industrial demonstration orchestrated by a nation whose factories had mastered perpetual creation. German analysts within the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht recalculated ratios obsessively, comparing Allied landing statistics against national production charts that now seemed grotesquely inadequate. They realized that every ship on the horizon represented not a singular effort, but an unbroken chain of steel, manpower, and mechanized logistics. Oberleutnant Walter Ohmsen received updated intelligence summaries from captured documents and aerial reconnaissance photographs. Each revealed that the United States had launched nearly 7,000 vessels simultaneously while maintaining supply convoys for the Pacific theater. The comparison humiliated every calculation previously accepted by the Reich's military planners. America had produced more transport capacity in 1 year than Germany could in its entire wartime span. Even Luftwaffe staff officers began whispering that material, not ideology, now defined warfare's outcome. Spirit could not repair bridges, replace fuel, or build replacement aircraft faster than industrial machines operating continuously across oceans. Inside command centers, typewriters clicked like distant gunfire, as clerks updated casualty projections exceeding every expectation. Reports noted Allied tanks already advancing inland, supported by self-sustaining logistical columns, transporting ammunition faster than destruction consumed it. German counterattacks launched piecemeal against consolidated armor formations found themselves annihilated before forming coherent fronts. The Atlantic Wall's ruins had become silent reminders of misplaced belief in static defense against mobile production. Military historians would later describe D-Day as the precise moment when the industrial century achieved its most complete military expression. Ohmsen, staring at the endless procession of landing craft through binoculars, whispered to a nearby officer that the invasion looked mechanical rather than human. Every movement seemed calculated by factories, rather than generals. Even the sea appeared organized, its surface transformed into an assembly line of ships delivering precise components of destruction. The officer beside him murmured that no empire could survive a civilization capable of transforming raw material into war at such velocity. As evening settled, Ohmsen wrote in his field diary that courage was still present among defenders, yet courage no longer mattered. Machines built by nations without bombardment, fueled by unbroken supply lines, and supported by limitless labor, would decide history's direction. That realization, he knew, was more devastating than defeat itself. By June 8, 1944, the atmosphere within German command centers had shifted from defiance to intellectual surrender, though official rhetoric maintained its hollow certainty. Officers who once quoted Clausewitz now studied American production charts as if decoding divine scripture, searching for hidden weaknesses that no longer existed. Oberleutnant Walter Ohmsen, surrounded by exhausted communications clerks, listened to intercepted transmissions detailing Allied supply coordination that surpassed anything within German logistical comprehension. The invasion was not improvisation, but orchestration, a mechanical symphony performed by nations whose industry had replaced improvisation with scientific precision. Within the corridors of the Oberbefehlshaber West, high-ranking officers debated the meaning of modern war. General Hans Speidel, normally composed, admitted privately that Germany had misunderstood its opponent entirely. They had believed in spirit overcoming matter, yet matter had proven inexhaustible. Reports from field units revealed soldiers fighting bravely, but every destroyed Allied tank reappeared the following morning, replaced by another from the endless fleets offshore. Even fuel shortages ceased to affect invaders, whose logistical lines operated like arteries pumping metallic lifeblood directly from England's industrial heart. Germany's supply convoys, conversely, were skeletal, decimated by Allied air power long before reaching front lines. Ohmsen observed that despair now appeared not as emotion, but as comprehension. Each officer understood the mathematical inevitability of collapse, though none dared articulate it openly. Intelligence summaries revealed that American factories produced 96,000 aircraft in 1944 alone, compared to Germany's 39,000. The contrast represented not mere numbers, but civilizations existing on entirely different industrial planes. Soldiers defending the beaches were not facing armies, but economic ecosystems. Even propaganda officers, once loudest in their defiance, fell silent before graphs depicting unassailable production capacity. Throughout Normandy, small German units fought isolated battles without coordination, their courage swallowed by an enemy capable of replacing loss faster than it registered. The myth of invincibility, nurtured since Poland, died quietly amid shattered communication lines and ammunition shortages. Officers who had once believed in destiny now whispered of inevitability. Machine against spirit, fuel against faith, precision against passion. The verdict had become absolute. That evening, Ohmsen climbed atop the ruined battery's observation deck, watching Allied transports illuminate the horizon like constellations. Their movement resembled an industrial tide that no defense could restrain. He realized Germany had entered an era where bravery was obsolete, where the mind's understanding of war would never return to illusion again. By the night of June 9, 1944, the intellectual foundation of Germany's military doctrine fractured irreparably beneath the weight of undeniable arithmetic. In war rooms once filled with confident proclamations, silence became the new form of speech. Officers stared at situation maps not to plan, but to understand how belief itself had failed. The concepts of Schwerpunkt, rapid maneuver, and concentrated counterattack, all pillars of blitzkrieg, collapsed when confronted by an enemy whose strength multiplied faster than destruction could diminish it. Oberleutnant Walter Ohmsen reviewed intercepted Allied orders and logistics timetables, realizing that his adversaries treated warfare as engineering rather than strategy. Each movement followed calculated precision, every reinforcement synchronized with industrial supply cycles rather than battlefield improvisation. For the first time, he recognized that Germany had never fought nations. It had fought processes. American, British, and Canadian systems had merged into a machine far beyond any single general's imagination. The scale of collaboration transformed every invasion beach into an extension of Allied factories, where replacement and repair functioned without pause. At German headquarters, analysts attempted to redefine the situation using traditional terminology, yet their vocabulary had lost meaning. The term front line itself dissolved, because no continuous barrier existed capable of restraining material superiority. The Reich's generals spoke of valor, but valor no longer equaled power. Armored divisions starved of fuel could not counterattack. Luftwaffe squadrons grounded by shortages could not defend, and artillery batteries without ammunition could not symbolize defiance. For the first time, the professional officer corps realized that technology and industry had rewritten warfare's grammar entirely. Reports from Normandy depicted Allied forces constructing artificial harbors within days, unloading thousands of tons of supplies under constant motion. German officers who witnessed those operations through captured film reels experienced disbelief bordering on reverence. To them, such coordination resembled architectural genius rather than military planning. The Mulberry harbors stood as physical proof that industrial civilization had achieved mastery over geography itself. That night, Ohmsen wrote in his journal that doctrine had become relic. The future belonged to those who could mass-produce solutions faster than problems appeared. He noted that every destroyed German tank symbolized not bravery's failure, but production's triumph. Watching flares arc above the beaches, he understood that Germany's doctrines had been written for an age already extinct. In that moment, realization replaced resistance, and history itself shifted toward machinery's dominion over tradition forever. By June 10, 1944, the machinery of Germany's defeat had become visible in every corner of occupied France, grinding relentlessly toward inevitable conclusion. The thunder of artillery no longer sounded like combat, but like industrial rhythm marking history's mechanical tempo. In command bunkers, officers who once believed in tactical brilliance now studied charts showing replacement rates, fuel consumption, and ammunition flow. The outcome was no longer determined by courage, but by ratios, equations, and production margins measured in factories thousands of miles away. Oberleutnant Walter Ohmsen moved through corridors thick with smoke and silence, carrying updated intelligence reports documenting the collapse of coastal defenses. Reconnaissance photographs displayed entire sectors transformed into logistical arteries through which Allied forces advanced methodically. Each destroyed German position was bypassed or rebuilt instantly by engineers possessing limitless material reserves. Ohmsen observed that German responses had ceased to resemble strategy. They had become reactions dictated by scarcity. Every counterattack consumed irreplaceable fuel. Every movement diminished the remnants of operational capability. Even victory on a single beach meant nothing when followed by replenished Allied waves landing without interruption. Within the OKW situation rooms, senior officers debated whether the war could still be prolonged strategically. Some argued that miracles remained possible, invoking past reversals on the Eastern Front. Yet younger staff officers, trained in engineering rather than ideology, presented logistical data demonstrating irreversible decline. Production had fallen below sustainability thresholds, transportation networks had disintegrated, and raw material supplies no longer reached factories destroyed by continuous bombing. America's industrial complexes, operating without disruption, produced more trucks monthly than Germany possessed in total. The comparison extinguished hope more effectively than enemy fire. As the days progressed, Ohmsen realized that defeat itself now functioned mechanically. It required no emotion, no human decision. The destruction of railways, the depletion of oil, and the loss of communication lines moved according to predictable progression. Germany had become a system collapsing under superior systems. The battlefield remained filled with bravery, yet bravery functioned as an obsolete variable within an equation already solved. That evening, Ohmsen returned to the observation deck overlooking the coast. Below him, Allied convoys illuminated the horizon in endless procession. Their synchronized movements resembled machinery rather than navies, operating on rhythm instead of chaos. He understood then that the war's end would not come through surrender alone, but through realization that the machine had finally defeated the soldier, and modern war had reached its logical conclusion. By June 11, 1944, silence settled across German command networks like ash following a burnt-out empire, heavy and irreversible. The teleprinters once filled with urgent directives now clicked intermittently, their messages fragmented, incomplete, or meaningless. Headquarters staff moved like ghosts through dim corridors, performing rituals of control that no longer influenced anything beyond the walls. Reports arrived describing Allied armored thrusts expanding inland, while Luftwaffe resistance dwindled to symbolic gestures across the skies. The chain of command, designed for precision, had dissolved into disconnected fragments scattered among ruined landscapes and abandoned headquarters. Oberleutnant Walter Ohmsen received new orders from Cherbourg's regional command, orders to hold positions no longer existing. The contradiction encapsulated Germany's condition: directives without territory, strategies without resources, faith without foundations. He transmitted acknowledgments nonetheless, aware that procedure had replaced purpose. Intelligence intercepts indicated that Allied forces now controlled multiple ports, unloading hundreds of thousands of tons of material daily. The realization struck every surviving officer simultaneously. The war's continuation existed only on paper, while reality advanced unopposed across Normandy's countryside. Inside the surviving command bunker, senior officers spoke in subdued voices, their faces pale beneath dim electric light. General Friedrich Ruger remarked quietly that industrial warfare required industrial nations, not romantic nations, of limited steel and endless pride. The comment lingered longer than artillery echoes. Around him, staff officers stared at the maps pinned across the wall, their markings representing units already annihilated or encircled. Germany's situation reports had become historical documents even before being filed. Outside, the night trembled with the sound of distant engines, the Allied convoys operating tirelessly offshore. Ohmsen stood beside the observation slit, listening as mechanical hum replaced the human cadence of war. He realized the command center's silence was not emptiness, but revelation. It signified the end of an age where officers believed thought could outweigh machinery. The doctrines that once glorified willpower had encountered the industrial age's mathematics and collapsed beneath it. When morning light crept across the wrecked coastline, Ohmsen recorded his final field note. The command still exists, yet command means nothing. Machines command now. His handwriting trembled, not from fear, but comprehension. Around him, the bunker's concrete walls vibrated with distant detonations, marking the systematic disassembly of empire. Above the shattered shoreline, Allied aircraft circled methodically, machines recording the final silence of Germany's command. When the guns of Normandy finally fell silent, the world awoke to a new understanding of power, production, and permanence. The war that began with ideology concluded with arithmetic, revealing that courage could inspire victories, but industry defined survival. Across the ruined coasts of France, the wreckage of the Wehrmacht stood as archaeology of outdated belief systems, monuments to an age when men thought valor outweighed velocity. The remains of bunkers and rusted guns whispered the same conclusion to history. Machinery had inherited dominion over human resolve. Oberleutnant Walter Ohmsen, captured weeks later near Cherbourg, walked through Allied supply depots, stretching endlessly toward the horizon. The sight astonished him more than defeat itself. Endless rows of vehicles, crates, and aircraft parts testified to a civilization that had transformed manufacturing into military theology. He wrote that America's victory had not emerged from chance, but from organization, from unbroken factory belts producing miracles through method. For every tank destroyed, another existed waiting to replace it before its absence was even recorded. He understood that his nation's downfall was less a collapse than an equation fulfilling its outcome. Historians studying D-Day decades later found the same truth embedded in every report and diary entry. The invasion did not succeed through luck or bravery alone. It triumphed because the Allied nations had mastered continuous creation. The Atlantic Wall was not defeated on its beaches, but in Detroit, Pittsburgh, Birmingham, and Manchester, places where furnaces burned longer than ideologies endured. The factories that had never stopped working became the real generals of the 20th century. For Germany's surviving officers, the revelation became both humiliation and education. The age of romantic warfare, defined by gallantry and maneuver, ended on the shores of Normandy beneath a mechanized horizon. Humanity had constructed forces greater than imagination and obedient only to production lines. The world entered a century where invention replaced heroism and where destruction became measured in tonnage, not courage. As Ohmsen's war diary concluded, he wrote that the machines had not merely defeated men, they had redefined them. Beneath the shadow of 7,000 ships and 14,000 aircraft, he realized that the soldier's era had passed into legend. The legacy of Normandy was not conquest but comprehension, that the industrial age had finally claimed history itself, and mankind would never wage war in innocence again.